In other news we're tracking for you, heads are certainly beginning to roll as more evidence of state capture is heard at the Zondo Commission of Inquiry. Now, the testimony of controversial businessman Edwin Sodi could lead to another significant arrest. According to unconfirmed reports, ANC Secretary General S. Magashule is the latest casualty after an arrest warrant was apparently issued against him yesterday. This is something the Hawks have in fact denied. Now, Sodi has described a network of patronage involving senior ANC members, many of whom he made payments to between 2013 and 2019. Now, Sodi was arrested and charged with fraud and corruption in relation to that 255 million rand asbestos contract awarded to his company, Blackhead Consulting. So the question is, can South Africans now realistically expect to see more high-profile arrests, including those at the helm of the governing party? Now, weighing in on this issue this morning is legal expert Ulrich Roux, who joins us via our video line in Johannesburg. Ulrich, good morning. It's always a pleasure having you on the AM report. I want to just talk to you about the asset forfeiture unit and what we've seen unfolding over the past couple of days in terms of Edwin Sodi's belongings being attached both at his business residence and at his home. Just take us through that process of how the asset forfeiture unit does its job to try and recover, I understand, 300 million rand.
Hi, good morning, Michelle. Thank you for having me. Yeah, so the asset forfeiture unit is a unit which focuses on economic crimes. And when there is an allegation made that someone has been involved in either corruption or fraud, theft or money laundering, the asset forfeiture unit can then apply to the High Court and bring in an application. It is normally an application which is urgent in nature, in order to freeze the assets of the person against who the allegations are made. They will have to show that there's a very strong suspicion and likelihood that the assets accumulated by that person or the suspect has been done so as a result of the proceeds of crimes. So in other words, he committed fraud or corruption which placed him in possession of these funds and which he used to purchase these assets. And a freezing order is then placed on the assets as well as potential bank accounts as well as potential investments until there is 100% clarity that the assets must not be forfeited to the state. So certainly the Hawks and the SIU, the Special Investigations Unit, showing their hand here, and a court would not have granted the asset forfeiture unit if there wasn't sufficient evidence for it to do so. So certainly it seems as if there is the likelihood of a conviction against Mr. Sodi and that there is strong evidence against it pertaining to this asbestos deal.
But I mean, essentially what it is a first step until there is a conviction.
Yes, definitely. One of the other legs that an asset forfeiture claim entails is that the assets must be frozen. Otherwise, they will be dispersed of by the suspect or the accused. So in other words, he could get rid of all these assets. He could sell all the vehicles, houses, withdraw the money out of the bank accounts. And in order to prevent that from happening, in order to prevent the money being squandered and lost to the state, they are frozen. And as you say, it is a first step. That order has been granted. The AFU and the SIU have now acted upon that order. And he has also been arrested with 6 other accused appearing in the Bloemfontein Magistrates Court last Friday. So the criminal prosecution will now run its course, and he will obviously be granted an opportunity to defend himself in those charges, but he will also be granted an opportunity to present or adduce evidence preventing the High Court from making the provisional order granted in the asset forfeiture unit application, from making it a final order. If a final order is made, then he would have lost those assets and it would have been forfeited to the state.
Right. So Ulrich, you and I have spoken many, many times over the years on various issues, including the state capture inquiry, and I'm sure you've been keeping up to date on some of the evidence that's been presented there. This week in particular, we saw that extensive document at the state capture inquiry. Part of that document, some 400 pages, were banking statements showing donations, they were called donations, from Edwin Sodi's Blackhead Consulting to not only the governing party amounting to millions of rand, but also to members, officials from the ANC who are also listed there in those line items. Their names are listed there as receiving tens of thousands, in some cases hundreds of thousands of rands from Edwin Sodi's Blackhead Consulting. I mean, in your opinion, is there at least on that basis a prima facie case of corruption in as far as Blackhead Consulting, the dodgy contracts involving the asbestos project, but also the fact that it's donated in millions to the governing party and to its members?
Certainly, I think there's a very strong indication. If there's payments made by any private entity or private individual to any government official, then eyebrows must always be raised and further investigation must always be conducted. But I think we must not lose sight of the fact that the Zondo Commission is an inquisitorial commission. So in other words, all of the evidence led at the commission is gathered by the commissioner, Deputy Judge Zondo, and it is then compiled in a report at the conclusion of the commission of inquiry. The evidence led, if it is under oath, however, can be used by the South African Police Services as well as the NPA in order to potentially prosecute people who have been implicated in the evidence led during the commission. So I think people must not lose sight of the fact that the commission is purely inquisitorial. It is a fact-finding and fact-gathering commission, but the evidence led there can be used by the SAPS and the NPA to prosecute people. And certainly the evidence, as you correctly pointed out this week, shows that there were numerous corrupt relationships, with Mr. Sodi's company and numerous government officials. And I think, it just adds on to the previous allegations made and evidence led as well in the Free State province. So obviously, Ace Magashula, his name being mentioned again, the same as in the Estina dairy project and all of the alleged corruption that took place there.
I mean, Edwin Sodi himself says he is allowed to support any political party of his choice. The fact that he got about R1 billion worth of tenders during those 10 years just happens to be a coincidence.
Yes, there's an old saying that if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. So if any irregularities took place in the awarding of those tenders, then that must be investigated properly. And adding on to what I said earlier, unfortunately, one cannot just go around and arrest people and prosecute them. If there's allegations made, that must be substantiated and backed up by sufficient evidence, evidence deposed to under oath by witnesses who can confirm these allegations. And I think that is now the duty of the Special Investigations Unit, as well as the South African Police Services, as well as the Asset Forfeiture Unit, to make sure and ensure that the evidence that is gathered is sufficient, that it proves beyond a reasonable doubt that there was corrupt relationships between Mr. Sodi and numerous government officials. And I'm just referring to his matter now because it is front and center. But all of the other alleged corrupt relationships that also took place, we must ensure that sufficient evidence is gathered and proper evidence that withstands the test and will withstand scrutiny under cross-examination as well, that if there were corrupt relationships, that must be identified and the proper sanctions, penalties and sentences must be imposed if a person's guilt is proven.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because arresting people, that's one thing. Even the Asset Forfeiture Unit intervening, what we need, I mean, if you think about the asbestos project on its own and how corruption really has a real effect. Yes, money's being stolen from state coffers, but it has a real effect on the lives and on the livelihoods of ordinary South Africans. So it's all good and well to do these arrests, to have all of these dramatic seizings by the Asset Forfeiture Unit, but what needs to follow then is prosecutions and jail time.
No, definitely. I mean, this asbestos deal is it's absolutely heartbreaking. It's thousands of people who weren't provided with adequate housing. And, as you earlier pointed out, the tender awarded of 255 million rand, which for all intents and purposes and what it looks like at the moment has been squandered used put in the pockets of private individuals. So we've seen previous arrests taking place, and then the prosecution not being able to successfully prosecute these people, and charges being withdrawn. And I think that we must ensure once again that the investigations are carried out properly, gather proper evidence that can withstand the threshold. Having said that, the asset forfeiture unit has successfully obtained that provisional order, and that already indicates that there's strong and sufficient evidence, because it has been considered by a High Court judge, and the High Court judge would only have granted that provisional order if the evidence presented to him or her was sufficient to show that a crime has indeed been committed. So let's see how things unfold. The South African Police Services will now be granted an opportunity to complete their investigation, and once they've done that, then the matter will be set down for trial, and the evidence will be led.
Ulrich Roux, it's always a pleasure talking to you. Thanks very much for giving us your insights there, some legal insight into what's been unfolding just this week, specifically in regard to Edwin Sodi. The latest news happening just yesterday, the asset forfeiture unit swooping down and seizing vehicles, his home, some things from his business residence there. That's Blackhead Consulting, certainly a developing story that we continue to track for you.